Hello, everybody. It's just me and Angela tonight, so we'll have more time to answer questions. I thought I'd say a few words about how we should think about this election we just went through. And we talked in the past, I think last week, about how the presidential race was a referendum on Trump, and Biden was not Trump. He was the vehicle progressives saw to get rid of Trump. And the issues we were raising, like a Green New Deal, Medicare for all, a job guarantee, reprioritizing federal spending away from the military toward social and environmental protections. You poll for those things, and it's 60 and 70% of the people are for them. Our platform was more popular than what Biden and Trump are offering. But it wasn't up for debate, because between the corporate media and too many progressives, including some prominent progressives, who the only thing we heard from was, don't vote for the Green Party. You got to vote for Biden. There's going to be a coup. You got to run up the vote and all that. So it was a tough year for us at the presidential level. But I think there's some reasons for optimism down ballot. If you look at, say, the ranked choice voting referendums, we got 5 more cities. They passed, including Albany, California, which is not just ranked choice voting from single member districts. They're electing both their city council and their school board by ranked choice voting from multi-member districts, which means you get proportional representation of the different parties. Even though their races are nonpartisan in California, that's a real step forward. The only other city that's had that is Cambridge, Massachusetts. They've had it since the 1920s, but that's a real step forward. And then Alaska, now that they've counted the mail-in ballots, the ranked choice voting referendum has gone ahead. It looks like it's going to win. So now we're up to 28 cities and counties, and 2 states have ranked choice voting. So this is an idea whose time has come. And one of the things we got to do is build upon these local struggles. And we got to win more localities and states to ranked choice voting, including ranked choice voting for multi-member districts for legislative bodies. And that creates the basis for replacing the Electoral College with a national popular vote using ranked choice voting for president. And in Congress, there's a Fair Representation Act, which would require states to elect their delegations to the House using ranked choice voting, and where they have more than one representative from multi-member districts. And that's going to vary by states, but that opens the door to a multi-party democracy. So I think that's reason to be optimistic. And then you go down the ballot, and I'll just pick 2. Oregon passed what we've been calling for, and that is the decriminalization of hard drugs. So people, instead of facing prison, can get treatment. And this opioid epidemic can be dealt with in a rational way. And then take Florida. You know, Trump won Florida, but a lot of those Trumpies voted for the $15 minimum wage. So that brings up, well, what do we do about these 73 million people that voted for Trump? You know, Trump lies, he denies science, he puts out conspiracy fantasies. And if we don't on the left start speaking to some of these Trumpies who, if you look at the exit polls, the economy was the number 1 issue for the Trump voters. Now there's a hardcore, particularly the white evangelical, Christian nationalists who are basically racist. That's a hardcore in the Trump vote, but there's also a lot of people who have faced economic hardships, and the Democrats have had no message for them. So they're fishing around for an alternative. And Trump lies about all the economic stuff he did, like his manufacturing miracle, which bled nearly 800,000 manufacturing jobs during this COVID pandemic, which, because he bungled it, led to this economic problem. We got to have a message for those people, because the Democrats sure don't. I mean, what we're hearing from the Biden administration is national unity, working across the aisle. I mean, I'm afraid McConnell's going to be the co-president. Everything got to pass him too, even if, the Democrats win those 2 seats in Georgia. By the way, in Georgia, there's a Public Service Commission race going on too, a runoff. And that really matters because Georgia's going bankrupt subsidizing the Vogel nukes. The only nukes from the Obama-Biden era that aren't now belly up because of cost overruns and construction delays. And it's only getting subsidized because the governor, Brian Kemp, stole the election from Stacey Abrams by suppressing the black vote. So anybody in Georgia, be sure to go all the way down the ballot and vote for the, I guess it's a Democrat. I'm not sure what the thing is, but check that race out because it'd be good to get somebody on a Public Service Commission so Georgia doesn't go broke putting these two nukes, pouring money down these two nuclear construction projects. And the last thing I'll say is that we're encouraging Greens to learn and exercise their election protection muscles in these recounts. The Georgia recount goes on tomorrow, and if anybody didn't get our email about that, it tells you how to do it. Write in the chat your email, and we'll send it to you. And then we put out a similar message to Wisconsin, where Trump is debating whether to spend $8 million. That's 4 times what Jill Stein had to pay to get a recount. And it's funny, you know, when Jill Stein was doing it, he said it was a scam, you know, to fill the Green Party's coffers. And of course, Jill's spending on all this recount stuff. And now Trump, who has scammed people, you know, he's grifted them for money for recounts and lawsuits. And now it looks like he might not spend that $8 million to get a recount in Wisconsin. So, you know, that's who he is. And then Pennsylvania may be coming up, where we have had a lot of Greens watching the first count. And so that's important because we need to learn about that because the next recount may be us involved. So I went on for almost 8 minutes. Angela, what do you want to say?
Well, I mean, you're the president. You kind of like, you know, it's kind of what you do. The thing that I'm thinking about is just overarching everything is going into this season of holidaying for people that, you know, holiday. And the fact that COVID numbers are spiraling up, like in a very, very big way. And, you know, I understand that people want to have, you know, as much of a feeling of normalcy as possible. But I need folks to remember this is not a normal year. And we are not in a normal situation. And so, you know, just thinking about going into this holiday season, don't be afraid to modify your plans to keep yourselves and your family safe, y'all. This thing is serious. And yes, there's talk about a vaccine being ready, you know, for what I heard today was the most at-risk populations by mid-December, which I really have my concerns about. But even with that, you know, there's also information coming out that people are being reinfected with COVID that have had it before, and it is doing unpredictable things. At the end of the day, this is a virus that they don't know enough about because it seems to, every time they think they have a handle, you know, scientists think they have a handle on it, it does something new. This thing is completely unpredictable. And so what I'm just thinking about with all of y'all is I really, really need y'all to take this seriously, and I need y'all to stay safe, you know, and keep your families and, you know, the families of choice, families of blood, however y'all do it, to keep yourself safe, because this thing is no joke.
Thai Lee, are you going to be a candidate in 2024 again? Well, for me, that's a question I'm not even going to consider until at least 2 years. I mean, we've laid out what we want to do with our campaign organization going forward, and that is to help local Green parties organize and really do serious, you know, organizing, not just mobilizing the usual suspects, but going out and doing deep canvassing, talking to people, listening, building relationships. whether you're a mostly white local and you want black folks involved, or you're in rural America and you want to reach some of those Trump people that are worried about their economics. We got to build a mass base. And so that's number one. Number two is we can elect thousands. The Greens have won 1,200 races over the years. We have over 100 people elected in local office. And that's another positive thing. Down ballot, we elected more people this time. But we need to scale that up to the thousands. And from there, to state legislatures and the House of Representatives. And if we can do that in the next 2 years, then we'll take a look at it. But for me, it's way too soon to, say whether I'm going to be a candidate. We really need to build a party. What happened? We were buffeted by the larger dynamic. This was a referendum on Trump. In 2016, it was an open seat with the two most unpopular major party presidential candidates ever, had the lowest favorabilities. Trump was the most unpopular, and Clinton was the second most unpopular. So the Greens did better. I mean, we can always do a little more with our campaign organization and, raising money and all that. But in the end, until we have a mass party with our, a foothold in the legislatures at every level, the Green Party is going to be buffeted by the larger dynamic. So I want to see what it looks like in 2 years and assess it then.
I'm going to leave it alone. I have to find a diplomatic way of saying what I need to say. But right now, that is absolutely utterly the furthest thing from my mind. And yes, we are committed to organizing right now more than anything else, because like Howie said, we have to build a left. I mean, more broadly than anything dealing with electoral politics, we have got to build a left that provides a place for people like Howie was mentioning earlier, people who are not necessarily riding with the racism and misogyny, trumpeted by Trump and people like him, but who are completely disillusioned with the Democratic Party, which is something that, we're seeing, in Black communities across the country with, there's a lot of, more than I've ever heard in my life, talk about, in our communities about disillusionment with the Democratic Party and the fact that they take our votes and support for granted. What are all our alternatives? I can't talk today. What alternatives do we have that are, that are welcoming to us, that are ready for us, that are putting forth agendas that support our communities? And, it's us. And we have got to build a left where we're ready to receive, folks who are disillusioned. And, even bigger than that, if there's not a left for people to come to, we know what the alternative is, and it's ugly. So we've got a lot of work to do. President Eco, if you decide to run, y'all are relentless. You can start the presidential campaign now. Could that give us a new confidence?
I think confidence we'll get is by electing thousands of people to local office and building local parties that are leading issue campaigns, as Angela said, not just running for office. And, I think that'll give us all confidence that we can build a real independent movement. A lot of the effort on the progressive side is going into the Democratic Party. And what's the lesson of that? Well, Bernie Sanders always won when he ran as an independent. Mayor of Burlington, House of Representatives, U.S. Senate, over many elections. The two times he tried to run as a Democrat for president, the establishment closed ranks against him, and he lost. And so we can win as independents. I think that's the lesson of Bernie Sanders. Plus, all the progressives in the Democratic Party on the presidential race got behind Biden. And today he appointed a fossil fuel industry guy to his climate team. And the people they're talking about across the board, they're pro-corporate, they're pro-war, and exactly the opposite of what we need. They're going to, because the progressives didn't make any demands on Biden, he's going to take them for granted. And that's what happens in the Democratic Party. It's they let the progressive give speeches, but the corporate wing makes the decisions. So I think we'll get confidence by building an independent left that's, present in our communities, electing people to local and then state office and then the House, and is leading on these issue campaigns. Margaret Elizabeth.
Hey, sugar.
In my opinion, we need to target 2 congressional races in 2022 and devote all our national resources into helping them. It's difficult to keep splitting our limited resources in the way we do. We spread it so thin that hardly anyone gets a taste of the jam. You want to start with that one, Angela?
I think it's a legit concern. That's pretty much all I've got. I think that, what they're saying is absolutely legit. But you are the nuts and bolts person when it comes to that. So
yeah, well, the Canadian Greens did that, and that's how they got their first member into their parliament. The way the Green Party in the United States is structured now, it's not capable of doing that. It doesn't have resources it can devote, and it's got such a loose structure that even if it made a decision to do that, it couldn't back it up. And then the other thing is, every local candidate, they got life or death issues in their own district that they're very concerned about. So it's hard to say, well, we're going to ignore you and just focus on a couple others. But I think if we get to a situation in 2 years where we have, a candidate or two that's got a real chance of getting elected to the House, I think that in itself will attract, Greens around the country, at least giving financial support and maybe some going out there to, do the canvassing involved in the campaign. So I think that kind of sums up where we're at. It's something to consider, but I think we have to get to a situation where it's a real live opportunity.
Rebecca Anthony, I was just reading your statement, Rebecca. How you doing, boo? Yeah, thinking about the presidency is a waste of time right now. There's so much work, community work to be done, and to help however I can. Oh, we gonna hit you up. First off, I'm happy to hear that you want to do that. And also, that's my personal feeling, and that's something that Howie has also expressed, is that, electoral I told y'all I can't talk today. Electoral politics is only one piece of the puzzle. And, we believe that like the most important work is the work people are doing locally, that, changes, influences people's material conditions where they are, especially with a rebellion happening, with a pandemic happening, with people who are still out of work, and I read that evictions, the threat of evictions will be a big thing come January, which is in a lot of parts of this country, dead of winter. So we've got a lot that is going to be, become very important, or that is very important now, that, we need to be doing at the local levels where we are. And I want to I saw something in the chat where someone said we missed an opportunity not reaching out to Ice Cube by, like the other parties. Baby, we weren't invited. He didn't ask us. Had he asked us, we would have been happy to roll out what he was looking for, which was a Black agenda. We've had one. We've had one forever. All he had to do was holler. So I wanted to touch on that.
I think we actually tried to reach out to him. I think our media people did, but got no response.
I know I added him on Twitter, I don't know how many times, and a bunch of my followers did too. He never responded to us. And I think people just like assume when somebody doesn't, he didn't ask everybody to meet with him, Ishmael. We were right here. All they had to do was holler. We did. We added him. Same way we did with Charlemagne the God with the Breakfast Club. People, I hate to tell y'all this, but people ignore us. Okay, if you're not one of the two parties of the duopoly, they don't take you seriously. So if you got to end with him, Mr. Bay, holla, because we'd still love to have that conversation with him.
Lisa Sabota.
Lisa!
My perception is that the MPP, Movement for a People's Party, isn't a true left party. They're trying to be a centrist, socially liberal policy or party, and their economics are as bad as the libertarians. I think that might be overstated. We do know that they were asked when they had their convention this summer why, Angela or I were not speaking, and the answer I heard was that we're too socialistic. So I think they're, trying to be a liberal, progressive, reform party. But the bigger question is, can they even organize a party? There's been a lot of talk for a lot of years, but it's got to be on the ground. The strength of the Greens is, even though we haven't had a strong national party to help local organizing, we're needed. So people just take it upon themselves. And that's why we've had so many ballot lines and we've survived 35 years. I mean, there have been much better funded and supposedly broader based parties like the Labor Party effort, which supposedly had 6 million, it had unions with 6 million members, and they never really got to the point of running. In fact, a lot of people from that effort who wanted to run candidates are now Greens. And they had a lot more money than we've ever had, but they've been gone for 20 years now. They talk about, they're still a small organization, and they call it the 10% solution. When 10% of the unions are ready to support a Labor Party, then we can do it. And my answer to them is the 10% solution is when an independent left party like the Greens gets 10% running for president, then the unions are going to jump on board.
Hey, Ade Mori. We should address, and I saw this in the chat, we should address the issue of COVID precedents in regards to ballot access lawsuits. We do not have alternatives or other avenues to use during a pandemic that doesn't hurt parties' ability to get or keep ballot access. Many states' ballot access laws are not set up to address campaigns during a pandemic. And I think we're seeing that, or that we've seen that. And you could definitely speak to that one, Howie, because I mean, you know the internal nuts and bolts, but just from what I've seen, the fact, in so many places, we actually, during a pandemic, had to fight, to get some sort of relief because we can't go door to door because it's not safe. And it was rough. So, but like I said, you could speak to it a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah, well, every state is different. And we had many state parties contact their local governments, their state governments, to see if they could get relief in the form of just lifting petition requirements. That's what Vermont did. And because of that, we made the initiative, and a lot of, third-party candidates that never would have got on Vermont got on. In other places, we negotiated electronic signatures. That was Rhode Island, New Jersey, and Maryland. Ohio was not responsive, so we sued them. We lost. I think we appealed there and lost again. In Illinois, they were not responsive, and we beat them at the district level. We beat them at the appeals level. We beat them at the Supreme Court level of Illinois, and we got on the ballot. Another thing is a lot of state parties were waiting to start their petitions until they got a response from the state government. So, for example, Virginia and Georgia got a reduction, but it was very close to the deadlines, and they didn't have time to really go out and get the number of signatures required. So the pandemic definitely hurt us. And that was one problem in getting on the ballot this year. So, we were down to 30 ballots compared to 37 in 2012 and 45 in 2016. And our goal was all 50, but the COVID pandemic really changed that.
Answering the question. Carneal Cash Humphreys. And if I butchered your name, just go on and tell me. Question: what is your stance on other Green parties? What do they do differently than you guys? How do they adapt to their area?
Well, I assume other Green parties means in other countries. And, Green parties are in government all over the world, at the national level, except in the United States. In fact, we got a lot of media inquiries and a lot of articles in Europe and Latin America, Africa, Asia, because they're trying to figure out, why can't the Green Party, get into the real debate in the United States? Most of these countries have proportional representation. So the first Green Party that really broke through was the German Green Party in 1983. They had a 5% threshold in their proportional representation system to get into the Bundestag, which is their Congress. And the Greens got 35 people in. And that woke us up all over the world. We all said, yeah, that's what we should do. And that started Green parties all over the world, including here in the United States. And then even in countries where they don't have proportional representation, they have, winner take all single member districts, like Canada, like the UK, like Mexico to some extent. The Greens have still broken through. And I think it's partly the political culture, because both the UK and Canada have third parties. Some of them are regionally based. Some of them are on the left, and we don't have a left party, except the Green aspiring to be. So they have the strength to break through despite the plurality winner single member district system. So I think it's the political systems that is the best explanation for why we're not in government. In terms of policy, we've had a saying in the Green Party going back to the 80s, 2 Greens, 3 opinions, because we like to debate, and that's good. And between the parties, there are political differences. Some are more to the left, some are more socially liberal, environmental, peace-oriented, but not socialistic in their economics. They're progressive, but they're not trying to change the system. And so, the Green Party in the United States is more on the left in that regard. It has moved to the left. I get the impression the Australian Greens have moved to the left, the Green Party of England and Wales, the what do they call it? The Left Green Alternative, I think, in Iceland. The Prime Minister of Iceland is a Green from that party. So mostly we read about them. I mean, I've never met with these folks. There are Greens in the United States that have gone to international Green gatherings, but I've never had the opportunity. I'd like to do it someday. That's one of the things I wanted to do in retirement instead of run for president. Do some traveling and meet some Greens in other countries. Post-COVID, maybe that can happen.
If people would, do what they can to get us out of COVID, yeah. I need people to act right. Hey, Andy. Andy Messick is asking, is there any way to start ballot access petitioning earlier? Or are there certain time frames where it is out of party hands until a certain time?
Yeah, it's both, because every state is different. There's some states where you can start petitioning now to get on the ballot as a party in 2022 or 2024. There's no limit to the time in which you can collect the required signatures. Other states, you can only elect it within a certain period. Like here in New York, as a result of a law the Democrats got passed under the cover of the coronavirus pandemic, we now have to get 45,000 signatures in a 6-week window. That may be the highest in the country. Texas has a 3-month window, and their number is something like 78,000. It just varies from state to state. So you got to investigate your own state and find out when you can start, when it's due, and the other requirements. So, but the Green Party and our campaign wants to help with this is the Green Party should have a ballot access plan to make sure we're on all 50 states in 2024. And in every state, it's a different strategy. We're on still in about 15 states, but we got our work ahead of us to get back on the ballot in states like New York. Maybe potatoes. What are you guys going to do about the fools who put Ventura on the Alaska? Is there bad blood between you and Cynthia McKinney now since she ran as his VP? Well, I think the Alaska, and it was a fool and maybe one or two other people. As far as we know, the so-called poll they did to say Ventura went forward was not available to the Greens in Alaska. They had a Zoom call like the day before the paperwork was due. And the only people I saw on it, beside this one guy in Alaska, were people from Tennessee and California, Ventura people. So a requirement of affiliation with the National Green Party is you put the nominees of the Green Party on your ballot. And our campaign paid petitioners about $12,000, $13,000 to do a petition for the Alaska Green Party. And when we handed it over, they played this game. And, that's very disappointing. So they may be disaffiliated and have to reconstitute themselves. As far as Cynthia McKinney goes, I don't even know if she agreed to, be on the ballot. She just found out about it, I guess. I haven't talked to her. And I would have some questions for her if I did, but I just don't know.
Somebody wants you to adopt them, Howie. I just saw that in the chat.
Man, I'm keeping track of my own schedule.
Hey, Jennifer. What would you want Ballot Access Committee to know/do starting January?
Well, Jennifer, I know from New York. Let's get New York going. We got a big petition coming in, guess it's March and April now in 2022. So 45,000 signatures, knowing the Democrats will challenge us, means 90,000 to be safe. And this year, when we put out bids for how much it would cost to, firms to do petitioning, they were charging $10 to $20 per signature. Do the math. You're looking at $1 million to $2 million. Now, we have a lot of volunteers, and we'll have to rely largely on that. And we can maybe get some of our volunteers to, work at it, pretty steady for, $2 or $3 a signature. That's what we're able to charge some of our people who helped us this year. So we also have a lawsuit joint with the Libertarians to say this law is unconstitutional on a number of grounds. So we may win there. So that's, what we need to do in New York. Nationally, the Ballot Access Committee of the National Party needs to have a plan. And we have people that got a lot of experience this time that can help them do that. And that's going to be a matter of raising money. And I believe we need a team of petitioners that are paid to go through the states over the next 4 years, really the next 2 years, because we want people running for some of these offices in 2022. A lot of state ballot lines can be secured by getting a certain percentage of the vote for Secretary of State or governor. So that's one thing. In other states, there are other ways to get on the ballot. You can just do a petition and you're on the ballot. And then you're on for a certain period of time, regardless of what the vote is for you. In South Carolina and I believe Florida, all you got to do is run a candidate once every 2 years for maybe a statewide office, and that retains your ballot line. Every state is different. So we need a plan and a schedule. So this team of petitioners can just march through the states and help the local volunteers when the time comes. Somebody asked, how many members does the USA Green Party actually have? Well, the National Party doesn't have a individual membership, which makes us different from other parties around the world. In the other Green parties, you agree to the principles and you pay dues to the National Party, then you're a member and you got voting rights. Our members in the National Party are state parties. And then the state parties have their own criteria. Some of them are dues paying parties. Some are whoever's registered in the party. And if they don't have registration, whoever says they're in the party. And if you count it by registration, we have about 250,000. But you can't register in about, I think it's 23 of the states. And then there's some states where you can register, but you can't in the Green Party because we don't have a ballot line. So you could double the number of people by that criterion of registering in a party who identify with the party. That's 500,000 people. And I think that says there's a lot of potential there because, if we can organize just a fraction of those people into, local parties and their state party, we'll have a formidable organization.
Hey, Zeke. Zeke Kramer is asking, do you think Biden will help to stop COVID in the U.S.? Not like we would. That's my short answer.
Yeah, I think he'll follow the public health advice that Trump did not. But the relief is he going to stop the consequences of COVID. The people facing eviction, unemployment. They're hungry. They don't have food. I'm afraid we're going to have crumbs for working class people and then an economic stimulus that is trickle-down economics. You give money to the rich, expect them to invest in new factories and whatnot to create jobs, and instead they're going to take that money because demand is low. It wouldn't be profitable to build a factory, and they'll invest in stocks, bonds, commodities, and real estate, and just rearrange and further concentrate ownership of the productive assets we already have. But that's been the bipartisan economic development policy for the last 50 years. I mean, the idea that the federal government should directly employ people and directly make goods and services that we need is just off the table. It's not even the progressive Democrats talk about that. Nixon did it. He had a public employment program, PEP. We did a lot of that in the New Deal. We did a lot more during World War II. That's how we turned, manufacturing on a dime into the arsenal of democracy to fight the fascists in Germany, Italy, and Japan. But now it's like beyond the pale. We have privatized so much of what the government, even the military, we pay more money to private contractors to do what service members used to do for themselves. Whether it's food or sanitation or you name it, intelligence, they're outsourcing it all, more expense. And, sewers and or water systems and, some of these highways, the tolls you pay go to private corporations. The parking meters in Chicago have been sold off. I mean, the whole government's for sale to these capitalist vultures. And then people wonder why services are so poor. So that's what I'm afraid the consequences post-COVID is going to be economic hardship from this administration. And so he may stop community spread, we'll get a vaccine, and the epidemic or pandemic will be behind us. But the consequences of what we went through will still be with us, I'm afraid.
I'm not all that optimistic about him. I mean, I think he'll be a lot more diligent just because he has to be about following the CDC versus what's leaving office. But as far as There's no medical infrastructure. Like, we don't have the infrastructure in this country. We don't have a Medicare for all program. Yes, a lot of people, and they're doing it here in South Carolina, you can get, and it's more available than it was a few months ago. Drive-through COVID testing is available, but at the same time, the health infrastructure that people need to be supported by if you get infected, the test, trace, and isolate, the things that we have been talking about, those things are not in place. And they're not on the table with this administration, as far as I know. Now, if some change, please let me know. But as far as what I know, what we're talking about as far as building the infrastructure for healthcare in this country, we don't have that under this administration. So I have a lot of concerns about that.
Yeah, and that brings up a lot of people are going to be permanently disabled, having gone through COVID. All kinds of complications. We don't know what they all are now, but we're hearing more from, cardiopulmonary issues to nerve issues, chronic fatigue. And now the federal government, under a law that was passed to enable people that were poisoned by a mine, I think in Montana, were able to get on Medicare. But there was some reports out today, I think from the American Prospect, that by executive order, Biden could use that law to expand Medicare to everybody who's been infected. You could even expand it to include everybody, because everybody could be infected, and by executive order. Now, Biden would never be so bold. So, I'm afraid also the Biden administration is not going to provide for the people that need better medical coverage than they're going to be able to get from the ACA, Affordable Care Act, public subsidies for private insurance, even with a public option to buy into Medicare. Because they're going to make that public option so it's not really undercutting the private insurance companies' premiums, which means, and somebody was asking how are we going to pay for Medicare in the chat. Hey, these public subsidies for private insurance, the Affordable Care Act, costs more than Medicare for all. And the figures I remember when I looked them up in the spring, when Biden or earlier than that, when the public option Democrats were attacking Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, saying Medicare for all costs too much. Their public option costs more. So if you want to be efficient, a single public payer just cuts out a lot of the overhead that now goes into haggling over, what the providers will be paid and what the insurance companies are willing to pay.
Catchy username. I saw this in the chat. I'm new to learning about the Green Party. Welcome. Is the point to be moving towards socialism, Mr. President?
Well, that's about system change. And our argument is, under capitalism, we can't get what we want. The Greens have four pillars of green politics. One of them is ecology. Capitalism is a system of endless growth. Different firms compete with each other. They got to grow or die. So it creates a system that grows like a cancer on the biosphere. And you can't have a sustainable society when you have an economy that's driven to grow without any sense of balance or reciprocity with the natural environment. One of our values or pillars is justice. Well, capitalism is a system of systematic exploitation. You get a fixed wage, the owner of the business gets all the surplus value you create. And that creates inequality and injustice. We talk about nonviolence, peace. That's one of the four pillars. The competition for resources and cheap labor markets and geopolitical positioning between all these capitalist countries creates wars. That's why we have a military all over the world, to make the world safe for US-based global corporations and banks. So capitalism breeds war. If you want peace, we need system change. And then finally, our last pillar is grassroots democracy. When you have gross inequality, when you have a billionaire class, their concentrated economic power translates into concentrated political power. It's not just campaign donations and lobbying. They can refuse to invest if they don't like what the government's doing and create a recession and discredit the reformers. As Bill Clinton said when he took over into his transition team was led by Robert Rubin, who came from Goldman Sachs. And Rubin told Clinton, you can't do your reform program, which was very modest. Some infrastructure investment, some investment in schools, and middle-class tax cuts. And Rubin said, no, Wall Street, the bond traders want a balanced budget. And so Bill Clinton said, you mean to tell me that I can't get reelected and implement my program because of a bunch of effing bond traders? And he didn't say effing. That was in Bob Woodward's book, The Agenda, about that part of the Clinton administration. So Bill Clinton found out that the capitalists were determining what he could do. So we can't have democracy under capitalism or full democracy. We need economic democracy in order to have real political democracy. So those are some of the reasons why we need to extend democracy into the economy to have a full political and economic democracy or socialism. So the point is also, to put it in more concrete terms rather than abstract, we want to stop climate change and stabilize the climate. We want everybody to get their basic human economic rights and needs met. We want peace. We don't want a nuclear arms race. So when we campaign, we're not saying vote for socialism or any ism. We're saying, vote for ecology, vote for peace, vote for justice. And here are the policies that will do it. And then, there's sort of two levels to politics. One is propaganda in the good sense. You come up with a slogan and some brief ways of getting your point across. And then there's education, where you study the system. How does the power structure work? How does the economy work? And, that's where questions of socialism versus capitalism come up.
I was hoping you were going to get this question. Hey, Kenneth, I help work the Twitter for the Indiana Green Party. Y'all are pretty dope. If you two could give advice, what is the best message you would like us to really drill? So far, mine has been left unity. And I want to thank you personally, Kenneth, for all of the stuff you've been doing, because y'all are pretty badass. So I just want to give you that shout out.
Well, I think there are a number of messages we're putting out there. Green New Deal, Medicare for all, job guarantee. I just tweeted before we got on the program 2 tweets about ranked choice voting, telling people about the victories and how we got to build on them to eventually replace the Electoral College with the ranked choice national popular vote for president and get the Fair Representation Act passed so Congress can have proportional representation and a multi-party representation in Congress. So I think that's a big message. And it's a good message for us because, we always get called the spoilers. Well, there's the answer to the spoiler problem. So don't call us the spoilers. If you Democrats, don't get behind that, you're the spoilers. Christian Salazar, how are we going to organize at the grassroots with COVID rampages across the country? You want to start that one, Angela?
Yeah, I keep putting myself on mute because my neighbors are partying and I don't want all y'all to hear all that. Well, that's a really good question. And one of the things that we've been talking about ourselves is, how do we do this safely? Overarching everything else, how do we get to talking to people safely? And different locals have been doing different things. There have been, folks that, are able to meet in person in places that are safe, outside gatherings, things like that. We have to talk to people. And that's going to be, that's face-to-face conversations have, it's been the heart of organizing, building relationships, real relationships with people where they know us, they know who we are, we know them, we show up, we are building relationships with people. And we're just going to have to be very diligent about doing that safely. One big thing is, we do using electronic media. I mean, we've had to. Zoom has been a big help through this pandemic with talking to people. I mean, of course, it's not the same as being in front of someone and, looking them in the eyes and talking to them, but, that's been helpful. And, where we can get together, whether it's outside. I know the weather is starting to change. It's not even as warm down here as it was. Thank goodness it's starting to feel like fall. But, that's something to consider too. What are your ideas on that, Howie?
Well, I think, right now we can always get on the phones, talk to people. And we can also have Zoom meetings. I think as soon as we can, getting back to door, maybe in the spring. We did some of it, some places did. Unite Here, the union in the restaurant and hospitality industry, they got savaged by the COVID pandemic. And they went out and knocked on doors. They had training on how to do it COVID safe. Go out there with hand sanitizers, masks, visors, gloves. Now the Trump people, they knocked on doors, 1 million doors a week for months. And the Biden people didn't really get going until October. It was Unite Here and a couple other unions that really did most of the door knocking the Democrats did. But it was done. And so I think you just got to adapt to the COVID. Now, right now with the charts going straight up, infected, we got 1 million people. It took us, 8-9 months to get to 10 million. We got the next million in a week to 11 million the last week. I mean, this is accelerating. It's a COVID explosion. So I would say, wait till we get this tamped down a bit. Now's not the time, I think, and people wouldn't appreciate it. Plus, it's getting colder. Certainly up here, there's an inch of snow outside my door right now in Syracuse. So, but I think door to door is really good because, there's something about being right there with somebody and the body language and the connection. You follow up with phone calls. You follow up with, bulletins from your local to the people you've talked to. Not complicated stuff. Just tell them what's going on. Ask them questions. Give them an opportunity to let you know what's going on. And Zoom meetings. I mean, we've all learned how to Zoom in this environment. I didn't know how to Zoom until the lockdown. So that's another way to, get people, particularly over dispersed areas, together. So I think maybe we'll come out of this with another tool to organize. So, but anyway, yeah, when we can go back to door, that's a good. And I would say they call it deep canvassing now. When an election's coming up, they do this flyby canvassing. They just talk to you long enough to figure out whether you're 1, 2, or 3. 1, you're for us. 3, you're against us. 2, we really couldn't tell. And they move on to the next door and try to cover everybody. Deep canvassing is when you really have a conversation with people and listen to what they're talking about and just ask them, what's going on? What are you concerned about? And build relationships that way and identify as you do that, people that are natural leaders. And, there's a phrase called Big Mama. There's always some woman on the block that knows everything going on, that everybody kind of looks to find out what's going on and to get advice from. In workplaces, there's some people are loudmouths, but there's some people that are quieter, but everybody, kind of looks to, what are they thinking? What are they going to do? And you want to identify those people because they influence within their spheres. I mean, it's just one of the things organizers learn to do, identify those people and try to get them involved in what you're doing. Or maybe you get involved in what they're doing to build a relationship. So anyway, yeah, the canvassing, talking to people, we got to be outward facing. You know, I saw somebody ask, do we want to form an eco-socialist caucus in the Green Party U.S.? I want to form a green socialist network that's talking outside the party to the people. And, you know, this faction fighting doesn't get us very far. You know, if people aren't in their communities reaching out, facing outward, and instead of focused online and all these little fights, you know, you're just going to be fighting online. You're not going to build anything.
Hey, Z Money. Hi. At the World Economic Forum, CEO Klaus Schwab spoke of using corona crisis as an opportunity to push in permanent social changes as part of a great reset, a la Milton Friedman. Thoughts on this?
Well, I think the Milton Friedman is what Naomi Klein calls, what's the phrase she uses? The shock doctrine. So when you get in a situation where things can't stay the same, for Milton Friedman, like in Chile after the coup, it was an opportunity to, you know, privatize everything and impose market discipline on the working class. But it's also an opportunity to do something progressive. And I think the corona crisis, particularly the economic depression, is an opportunity to say the Green New Deal, with, in our case, in the United States, providing universal health care, but also this direct employment and production of goods and services through the public sector is a way to get the economy going again. And so it's an opportunity to change our paradigm, or at least educate people about that. Because like I said, you know, what we're getting from the corporate Democrats and the Republicans is more of this, you know, corporate welfare, trickle-down economics. And that won't work as an economic recovery program for most people. And it's not what we need. And we may not be able to change their policy in the next 4 years, but we can build support for it from below and do local and state versions of it where we can, and then build the political basis for getting it at the national level down the road. Zeke Kramer, would you consider yourself in the Green Party isolationist? No, we're internationalists. We're in solidarity with the working class and the oppressed all over the world. Capitalism is a global system, and if we're going to have system change, we got to be working with our allies all around the world. Now, as far as our military profile, there's no reason for us to have 800 foreign military bases, be engaged in 14 ongoing wars. One just started in the Western Sahara. Morocco, whose military is backed by ours, trained by ours, just invaded Western Sahara, which has been trying to get its independence since the colonial era. And Morocco claims it. The people there want independence. And so here we are in a colonial war. That's not the way we want to engage with the world. Instead of being the world's global military empire, we want to be the world's humanitarian superpower and help people, make friends instead of enemies, provide aid instead of arms. And that will do more to promote peace and security than having our military all over the place. Aiden Thoreau, what is the Green Party's approach to international trade? What would you say? Would you say you're more in favor of globalization or protectionism? And I think that's a false choice. Protectionism basically is dividing the working class across the world. It's blaming other countries for problems that our corporations provide or created. You know, when we protect ourselves from, you know, Chinese imports, a lot of those imports are, you know, from American companies that move production over there. What we want is globalization from below, you know, among the working class, so that when we come to trade policy and trade agreements, they're agreements that bring standards up for labor and the environment across borders. In contrast to what we have now, what they call globalization is corporate managed trade, where the trade agreements are designed to enhance the profits and undermine our labor and environmental protections. So they have what they call non-tariff trade barriers, and corporations and states can go to these secretive trade tribunals and say a regulation that a country may have to protect their environment or their workers can be overruled under the trade agreement because they call it a non-tariff trade barrier. For example, we got a fracking ban in New York. And there was talk for a while of Canada taking us to one of these trade tribunals under NAFTA and saying that was a non-tariff trade barrier to the gas drilling corporations. Hasn't come to that, but it could. Oh, we're not getting more questions because it's been an hour. It went fast. So there are more questions. We're going to be here every Tuesday answering questions, and we're going to have guests. And as soon as we got them confirmed, we're going to bring them on and let you know. And I guess my last thought for the night is what Angela said at the top. Really be careful out there. Follow the health guidelines because, like I pointed out, we had 1 million new infections this week. And the death rate, is a lagging indicator. You get the infections and you get the hospitalizations, then you get the deaths. The epidemiologists are now saying 400,000 deaths total by the inauguration. And of course, Trump is not cooperating at all with the incoming Biden people on the COVID pandemic. His health advisors saying, he said, your grandparents may be going to their last Thanksgiving, so let them come, where they might get COVID and it will be their last Thanksgiving. These people are idiots. So, really be careful out there because we want to see you next week and the week after and so on. How about you, Angela?
Yes, just thinking about the stuff that I read where, doctors are coming out and saying, please, 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 if you don't have to travel, keep your, don't travel, don't fly. Maybe the people that, you're immediately visiting don't have someone who's vulnerable, but the folks who are in that house go home to someone who is. We don't need it. And I know that, people want to have, like I said, a normal. That's completely understandable, but we're gonna have to. Z Kramer, I'm not dancing on TikTok, sweetheart. I'm 46. That's a little too precious. Sorry. I have to figure something else out, but you will not see me dancing on TikTok. I just need people to be mindful and be careful, and as much as you possibly can. And like G's videos just said, so many folks in their family work in healthcare. My daughter and my sister are both CNAs. I need people to be safe. We need, it's a sacrifice, and it isn't, the holiday season that people are used to. Is going to feel very different. But I want y'all to be safe and just understand that this virus mutates. It is completely unpredictable. They don't know, they're constantly finding health problems and reinfections. They're looking at that now. Herd immunity is not what they thought it was going to be. So we really, really, really have got to be careful. Well, Elizabeth, you do the dancing on TikTok, baby. I'm a Capricorn. It's not gonna happen. Sorry. I'll figure something else out, but no. So I need y'all to stay safe, like Howie said.
All right, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see y'all in Solartopia. That's where we're going.